Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Gabriel Santos from gfsantos.com. And in this video, I just want to take, 5 to 10 minutes to share with anyone who is either a subscriber or who has just recently found my videos. Share my backstory, just a quick backstory, and what my life was like in regards to marijuana addiction and marijuana use, even just a year ago, but even like a little more background, like a couple years ago, what my life was like, what kind of results I was producing, how I was feeling on the inside, and just an overview really of what my life looked like a year, 2, 3 years ago compared to where I'm now, which is much different. So let's start off with the weed part, the weed addiction part. So even just last year, but the last 3 years prior to 2018, weed and responsibility and me did not go together. I honestly felt like I had no sense of self-control, and my actions showed that. And what that looked like was, me smoking every day, probably within the first 30 minutes of my day, and definitely before I'm going to sleep, and definitely 2 to 3 times in between. And really, I didn't know it at the time, but I was depressed. Uh, and in hindsight, that had to do with the fact that I just didn't really have a purpose in my life other than to just kind of get high. And it's not like I was a bad person or a bad, like I still, I did what I needed to do on a minimal level, but I didn't really know what to do with my life other than the kind of get by on a daily basis lifestyle. And so weed and video games was pretty much the only thing that brought me a sense of joy. In terms of my relationships, both platonic, friends, family, and romantic, on the romantic level, I had none. I had a couple girlfriends when I was in college. Both of them lasted a year or longer. But I, for the last 2 years, I didn't really like indulge in any romantic relationships or even romantic interests. I was just very closed off to that. There really wasn't much space for anything in my life except for weed and being by myself and playing video games, which is all, there's no judgment in that. In terms of how the rest of my social life was going, like I said, I spent a lot of time alone on purpose. I didn't want to be with other people. In fact, I used to identify as socially anxious, of which I no longer identify with at all. Not at all. Nextly, with my family, I was still very closed off. Long story short, with the social and relationship side of things, I was very closed off, not very open, didn't know how to trust people, didn't know how to trust myself emotionally either. In terms of my other results, really not much, guys. Really not much. Most of my time was either spent being stoned or like trying to figure out how to just move forward. But because I tried so many times to either quit or take a break or get control and failed, I didn't really know what to do. And what's ironic is that the anxiety and stress and the problem, which was smoking weed too much, was so, like I said, so stressful that the only way I felt like I could even get rid of the stress of it was to smoke weed. So it was just like this vicious cycle of just, all of these things that weren't working and not knowing how to fix them. And I really thought that the solution was to quit weed. I was blaming weed. And understandably so, because my life all like seemed to take a turn for the worst when I started smoking weed. Because prior to smoking weed, right after high school, I was a 4.0 GPA student. I had friends, I had family. My head was tied on my shoulders. I had a good work ethic, but one thing that I always lacked in high school was I felt socially awkward, and I felt very anxious and afraid when it came to girls, which wasn't there before high school, but I got to high school and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, I just like became a shell of myself. And then when I got to college, I decided I was no longer going to be socially weird, and that I was going to like finally have sex for the first time. I was going to be cool. I was going to party and things like that. So that's exactly what I did. But what happened was instead of valuing myself, my personality, and my own self-worth, I let weed be the thing that defined me. I felt like that's what made me cool, and that without weed I wasn't cool, or without weed I wasn't chill, or whatever. So my whole world was centered around weed, truly. And it wasn't like that at first, but it just, the way I spent my money was centered around weed, who I hung out with was centered around weed, my sense of time management and what I did and what I couldn't do was centered around weed. And it gets pretty startling. If you're watching this and you can relate to any of this, you know what it's like when like, damn, like all I really care about is just getting stoned. And what I want to let you know, and anyone who's watching this that may not be addicted but knows someone who is, or you think they are, is that if someone is willing to jeopardize long-term consequences for short-term gratification, in this case with weed, let me put it another way. If someone is willing to like stop hanging out with friends and family and let their grades slip and let their physical health slip and let their financials slip in favor of being able to get stoned as often as possible, that means that their life outside of being high is painful as fuck. Right? That's the only explanation. There's no reason why someone would do all those things I just said in favor of being stoned unless the experience of life that they're having when they're not stoned is just more, there's more suffering there. And that's exactly what the case was for me. More specifically, I didn't know how to handle that anxious feeling right here. And the only way to kind of calm it down was to smoke weed, right? And then as the ironic part is that as all those areas of life start going further and further down, you feel the problems start to stack up. And the only way to really solve the problems is to solve the problems, right? And then when each problem gets solved, that weight gets lifted. But it can get to a point where there's so many problems that like it's too much to even go after. It's kind of like if you ever were a hoarder, or you've seen that show on TLC, The Hoarders, they just literally have mounds of crap everywhere. And when you tell a person who's accumulated years and years and years of crap, and you're like, okay, we'll clean it, like it's just too much. Like it's just too much. There's too much crap, and it's like, where do I even start? And how is this all gonna get done? And it's just too much. And so just imagine, for me and maybe even for you, like if you've been smoking for years and years and years, and you've had all these problems kind of stack up, that the reason why it's hard to make that transition to being, transformed and changing your life is because your problems are similar to that of a hoarder's. It's just they're everywhere. Like they're stacked up. There's no sense of organization, no sense of like direction. Like, how do I do this? There's just so much. And not to mention that the person that is a hoarder, like that's the one that needs to change first. Like that's the one that needs to change first. And similar to you, like in order for you to solve the hoarded amount of problems or challenges that you face with weed and the rest of your life, like you need to get to work here. That was my experience, at least. The more and more I worked on myself and evolved internally, the more and more my outside life was changing and looked different and more of what I wanted. So so that's what my past was, and I failed to quit many times, and that's why, if you look back in one of my videos, like maybe 10 or 15 videos before this one, like I mentioned, like I stopped trying to quit. But instead of it being out of fear and out of giving up, I just realized, like, in a practical, pragmatic way, that quitting is not what I want. That's not what I want. What I want is self-control. What I want is for my life to be on track. What I want is to value who I am without weed and to trust myself without weed. And that's exactly who I am today. And so, I consume weed once, twice, maybe even up to 4 times a month, and it's gotten to the point where I no longer have to really keep track. What I do know is that possessing it is not doesn't work for me, and I'm not really interested in spending money on it, and so the only time I do is when when I just when I feel that it's responsible and appropriate. Appropriate meaning, like, I don't like, it's kind of like, think of it like this. If one of your goals is to work out and be in shape, okay, and let's say, you're an Olympic athlete, probably 90 to 95% of the time, you're going to be on track of everything, right? Your nutrition's on track, how many calories you're getting, the type of food, the way you exercise, the time of the day, the amount of times of the day, right? All of that, right? But then, every now and then, even an Olympic athlete will have a double double from In-N-Out, or if you're not from the West Coast, like, you have a pizza and a shake. You might even have that a couple of days a week, maybe. I don't know. It really depends on the person. But the point is that the way I use weed and the relationship I have to weed is similar to that of the Olympian story I just told you, where it's like most of the time I'm on track. Like, I'm eating, and this is just for me, I'm eating the right foods, I'm doing the things every day to get to where I want to go in terms of being a successful life coach and making YouTube videos and writing on my blog and, serving my clients and things like that, my mental health. The intention behind the way I use weed has really transformed. Whereas before it was like the intention and the relationship was like, help me, like I'm desperate, I'm needy, I need this, I can't stand on my own 2 feet, this is like the only thing that helps me. It's like a security blanket. It's truly like weed was like a security blanket for me. And nowadays, weed is more of like a tool to support me in my growth, because 95% of the time I'm doing it on my own. And so, analogous to how like people will go get a massage when they're pretty stressed, I'll go use some weed to decompress. Like I said, it once a week max, every other week most likely, and I actually discovered something. So there's a big difference between CBD based marijuana or consumption and THC. THC is the stuff that you get from your dispensary. It's in the flower. It's in your concentrates, and that's the stuff that gets you like blown. Whereas CBD is more like at least from my research and experience, it's more so it separates the good medicinal aspects of it and then doesn't really give you the hazy high part of it, which I enjoy. And so, in fact, I if anything moving forward, like that's the CBD is what I want to really be consuming, because what really puts me off from weed is sometimes it just kind of drains you and it makes you groggy and laggy, and just kind of sits with you for the rest of the day and maybe in the next day. So anyways, yeah, that's my story in a 14-minute and 24-second nutshell. All of it just to let you guys know who I am and where I came from, and hopefully for you to relate and understand that I was once in your position if you're someone who's struggling with weed. And my whole thing was like, I don't want to quit weed. Like, I want to be able to enjoy weed. But more importantly, I want to make sure my life is on track and that I'm constantly moving forward, constantly evolving. But yeah, so that's it for today's video, guys. I appreciate guys' comments. Do leave anything you want to share down below, whether it's, you know, critiques about the video style or maybe my speaking presentation, as well as just anything that you learned today or questions you have for me. And yeah, be sure to buy my book, Marijuana Mindfulness, on Amazon. It's $3. That book includes, it's about 61 pages, 13 chapters of you know, the stuff that I've been through in terms of weed and tools and insights that will help you, that really helped me be free from my weed addiction experience, and allows me to, you know, not only just smoke weed in a more responsible, happy, self-serving way, healthy way, but more importantly, so that the rest of my life is on track and that I can be centered and be happy and have a sense of purpose and create results, you know. So yeah, I highly recommend you buy that book. If you're, you know, if you want to see, like, I don't know, some samples of the book, or you maybe don't have the budget, I don't know, $3, feel free to comment down below what your situation is. And yeah, so that's it, guys. Gabriel Santos from gfsantos.com. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.